Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate the time that all of you are spending here with us today. And I think it's no coincidence that we have four very lovely ladies over here, all of whom are much smarter than I am, to talk about one of the most pressing issues that we have in society today, climate change. Now, every single week in my mailbox, I get email messages from PR companies with keywords like decarbonisation, net zero, carbon neutrality, sustainability, green financing, and all the other sorts of keywords that you think about when you talk about climate change. I think it's no small feat that a lot of companies these days are putting it at the top of the agenda. Just decades ago, we were thinking about, corporates are thinking about purely making profit out of polluting. And that's how a lot of them have grown to the companies of today. Today, we are seeing climate change agenda as one of the hugest priorities that we have that humanity is facing. And I think I'd like to first start off by letting our esteemed panelists tell us a bit about the exciting developments that they've seen. Starting with you, Ling, perhaps you could let us know, in terms of Wavemakers, you have a mantra about people, planet, and profit. How do all these things gel together?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say this is my first ever all-women panel, which it's really exciting given how many panels I've been on. Yeah, so Wavemaker, I'm a venture partner at Wavemaker, which is a B2B early stage venture capital fund. But recently we've spun off a Wavemaker Impact, which invests in proven entrepreneurs looking at low carbon world. What we've seen is this. About 80% of global GDP is now committed to net zero. But guess what? There are not that many solutions that are out there for them. So we think there is a huge opportunity. I think of this as not, when people think about decarbonization, impact, climate change, they think about the pain. I think of it as a gain. Precisely because there are the 80% of global GDP, 5,000 companies and growing have now committed to net zero. And so there's this white space. And in Southeast Asia particularly, we have, just in agri-use, electricity from buildings, land use and carbon sinks, industrial processes, each of this contribute more than 20% of carbon emissions. And there are many opportunities for us to back startups that can help solve this problem. These problems, myriads of problems. And the other thing is, the tech is already there. We don't need nuclear scientists to build it. These are not science projects. The tech is already there. The problem we're trying to solve is to have back innovative business models that can help with adoption. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you so much. And Puyen, Vertex is known for investing in a lot of some of the big names that we see today in the world of business and corporates. Now, one of the key things that you guys look out for when you're talking to a company is also their ESG policies and what they have on the agenda. When you evaluate them, whether they are worthy investment or not, tell us about the journey that you've seen specifically with your company in terms of how you evaluate potential candidates and what you're seeing today based on your talks with them.
Thanks, Dylan. Nice to meet everyone. Very happy to be here. I'm Puyen. I'm part of Vertex Ventures Southeast Asia and India. Just to give a bit of context, we are not an impact fund, so we're a mainstream fund, focusing on Series A or early stage opportunity across Southeast Asia and India. So this topic is very pertinent though. So as a mainstream fund, how do we look at companies? Actually, there are two lenses. The first one is exactly what you mentioned, right? Every company, can you hear me? Yeah. Every company that goes through our door, we examine the ESG posture, environmental included, and what we look out for would be whether at least they do no harm. That is the minimum filter that we apply, right? If they are engaged in vices, if they definitely are, detrimental to society, to the environment, we may go, okay, this is not an investment for us. But I think beyond that, if you compare ourselves to a decade ago, technology has advanced, market has evolved, market sentiment changed, regulatory framework has evolved as well. So we also see sustainability as an opportunity because more companies now are in a better position to disrupt the market, provide innovative solutions. So we have been seeking out investment opportunity in these genres as well, even though we are not an impact fund, we're a mainstream fund.
Yeah, and Caroline, so as Priya has mentioned, sentiments have changed. And one of the key items that we have on the climate agenda, of course, is the issue of recycling waste management. Now, of course, Circulate Capital is a big player in this area, and you guys are very focused on that. So what are you seeing on the ground in terms of how you handle these issues?
Thank you, Dylan. Good afternoon, everyone. So pleased to see everyone still this late in the afternoon, and thanks for staying around. So Circulate Capital, we are a very focused fund. We focus on financing solutions to address the climate change issue, both in terms of debt and in terms of equity. And because we're so focused, we are very closely integrated with both our LPs, our financiers, DFIs, as well as companies that we invest in. So when you talk about value adding, in the traditional private equity business, value adding is such a strong and important component. In a case when you try to invest in companies that are impact-driven or ESG, it is even more important. And so we are supported by our LPs, which include the brands, we have government DFIs, and then we have the private investors, all aligned in terms of one mission. One mission to create a circular economy, and then it flows down to the companies we invest in. We are very specific. We only invest in solutions for the circular economy, and starting with plastic recycling, because that is a huge problem. And so if you look at our portfolio, we've been around for only 3 years, but we have invested in 12 companies. We've already exited one. And our focus is trying to facilitate our brands, our DFI partners, to make sure that they provide a blended solution and a complete solution that then carries these companies, whether they be innovations or they be existing companies that are transitioning into a net zero or zero waste mission.
Now we've heard from 3 backers. I'd like to hear from Grace, who herself is a very esteemed entrepreneur for Unravel Carbon. So this is an area which you're helping companies in terms of monitoring their output for emissions. Tell us a bit about what you guys are doing and also what developments we're seeing in this area.
Yeah, thanks. So first of all, I was an ex-VC as well. I highly recommend being a founder again after being an investor. It's just more fun. You know how to play the game better. This is my 3rd venture. I've exited the first 2, and there's really been a trend, of seasoned entrepreneurs, repeat entrepreneurs, who are now dedicating, the next 5-10 years of their lives solving for climate, because it's literally an existential threat. So we are an enterprise software that helps companies track, reduce, and report their carbon emissions. It's a boring SaaS model where we're able to convert any company's accounting data into full carbon supply chain profiles. So that's what we do. We're seed stage, 9 months old, 40 people, headquartered in Singapore. We were told that we raised the largest seed round ever in Asia Pacific for a climate tech. I don't know how to verify that, but it was a 10 million round led by Sequoia and followed by Alpha, JWC, XA, Rebel Fund, GFC. And the reason I'm naming them is because for most of these funds, we are their first climate tech investment. So talk about, the needle moving towards this category. And certainly, although we are not really raising now, we don't feel the winter, in our category. Maybe there is in the US, maybe it's slowly spreading here, but literally in the climate space, the planet is burning, and so there's really not much time. We have 8 years left, if you have seen the IPCC reports, and what the problem we're solving is that, there are 400 million companies in the world, and less than 10,000 are measuring. Huge market opportunity, to your point. Yep. And even fewer are doing something about it. It's a huge gap. And so, being quite new to the sustainability space, I think being an outsider is now an advantage because we are really coming with fresh lens, using software product-led methods at speed and at scale to solve a very old, stubborn problem.
So I think we have some varied opinions on how different players are participating in the ecosystem when it comes to the climate change agenda. Now, one issue that I think we might have to talk about a little bit also as well is the fact that, clearly here, and all the people in this room, pretty much we are, to a certain extent, preaching to the choir. We all believe that climate change is an important issue that we should tackle. It's something that corporates should step forward and put their money where their mouth is and do things to be able to help us provide a better future for the people of this earth. But of course, there are those startups out there still who are putting up a business model. They're asking for backers and funders, and they may not exactly have the ESG agenda high on their list of priorities. Now, these startups, of course, they compete for funding from everyone, and they might come out with the argument and say, hey, look, I'm looking to make my business viable and profitable. I will think about ESG at some point, but at the moment, I want to make sure that you, as the investor, get your money's worth when you're investing in me. What would any of you say to these startups, who perhaps might not have the environmental agenda high on their plans, and why should they look more closely at it and more seriously at it if they want to do a viable business and grow as a company in the future?
Well, because I think to be viable, you've got to be adopting at least some framework or a path towards being climate friendly, or sustainable, and with good governance. That's just plain good business. Because which conference have you been in this year that hasn't spoken about decarbonization? Which government? All the governments can disagree on everything, but every single government probably in this world is going in one direction. They may disagree whether it's net zero by 2050, 2060, 2070, and how to get there, but everybody is moving towards that. You have consumers who are telling you they only want to buy, they are willing to pay extra or pay the same, but for a climate-friendly product, they prefer to do that over the existing product. So you've got consumers, you've got policy, you've got, as I said, the tech is already there. If the founder still doesn't think that it's good for business, not a very smart founder, you shouldn't be investing in non-smart founders anyway. So
Also, yeah.
I think that there is it's an irreversible change.
Also, climate risk is financial risk, right? Like
Yes.
if we are all not investing to bend the curve of a burning planet, literally, what are we going to monetize on and appropriate value on, right? So that's one. Another one is talent. And I think, this is a room of VCs, right, as we understand. And some of the most progressive VCs in the region have approached Unravel to help measure the carbon footprint of their portfolio companies. And I find that fascinating because the VCs would pay for that measurement for the portfolio companies. And they're coming in bulks, like can you measure all 30, can you measure 50, can you measure 20? And I think that is really a signature of our generation where, even the funders that have primarily a fiduciary duty to return capital to their LPs, they are literally investing in non-financial performance, really, right? And we're just so impressed, really, by that first batch of progressive funds wanting to do that.
I think from a practical standpoint also, right, there are a few considerations. One, if you generate less waste, if you're less wasteful, actually it's a way to make your business more efficient. So you could also think about it as a way to, trim your fats and as a cost-saving measure. But also the other consideration is more and more investors, for example, for us, even when we are not impact-focused, we are mainstream fund, we already integrate ESG into the way we look at investment. So as you're raising fund, it's no longer just enough to say that I can bring you 10x return, I can return a fund for you, but you have to mention your ESG posture. And to your point, climate risk is a risk for the business. For us, even if we are not looking to generate huge positive impact, we look at ESG consideration as a way to evaluate a company's risk posture. And I think the next practical standpoint is, as the company get bigger, at some point they may want to list in well-known reputable exchanges. And actually many public exchanges are now requiring companies to report their climate position, for example, adhering to TCFD recommendations, etc. So, what I'm trying to say is it's good to start early. Even though the absolute amount you're polluting the environment may be little because you're an early stage company, but it's good to embed these considerations into your policy execution so that it just become part of your company's DNA.
And based on our experience, we find that when you consider impact or ESG factors, the companies actually not only de-risk themselves from being too reliant on one specific source of energy, for example, fossil fuel. If you actually consider other sources of energy and you decarbonize, you actually can diversify your risk and decrease your costs. So very important for investors. The other thing is that it is known to be a value-creating element when you consider ESG and impact. So a lot of companies not only derive a premium on their branding, but they are also able to reach out to the community, and reaching out to the community, creating jobs, and then it just multiplies. The effect is tremendous. I mean, we've seen it in our own companies that we invest in. We help the vulnerables, especially women. So gender equality is very important to us when we look at investments. When we look at the board level, we make sure that, at that level, it is quite diversified and there's equality, gender equality. And also in terms of the management as well as the workers, we make sure that they are all well compensated, and especially waste, because when you collect waste, we make sure that they are properly paid and timely paid. So it is a big ecosystem that you actually can help create a lot of side effects and benefits, not just in terms of your own profitably bottom line, but in terms of the impact that you can create to society. So there's huge, tremendous results that can be gained, whether you're a startup or you're a mature company, if you consider ESG.
But it's becoming very big business, sorry. I would just say that, to quote some numbers from McKinsey, in 2018, $5 billion went into sustainable funds. In 2020, that number was 50 billion. And the first half of 2022 was 120 billion. So it is big business. People know that this is something that is worth investing in. It is our planet. And it's not going to, I don't believe, it may be called something else. Today it's called decarbonisation, ESG. Tomorrow it might be called something else, but it will continue being in that trend.
And Sui Ling, I just want to pick up on that point that you just said, that you said it's big business. The question that I would like to pose as well to all of you is, it is becoming a bigger segment in which VCs and investors are looking at, but in the long sustainable run, can it be a truly profitable business? The whole agenda of climate change, climate-focused company. To what extent can we expect these companies to be profitable enterprises in the road ahead?
I can give a very concrete example while you think of yours. But regulators all around the world are mandating, right, the disclosures and the responsibilities of such issues, right? They are basically, for the first time in history of mankind, not allowing the externalization of these negative externalities. So, for example, in the US, the SEC, right, is now working on a policy paper to mandate the disclosure of Scope 3 measurement in carbon footprint, which means the supply chain measurement that Unravel specializes in. The US alone is a 23 trillion market. That regulation is like a GDPR thing, it will open up literally a market size for platforms like ours to win in. And so it's really not a bifurcation of profit versus purpose anymore, because the entire planet is converging to your point that we need to solve this problem, and we are going to put in our sovereign funds money, our LPs money, our pension funds money to move the needle here. So where are all these innovations going to come from?
Yeah, I think maybe when we think about climate tech companies, we naturally, or maybe the tendency is to assume that they will not make money. It's just CSR. And I don't think so, right? And as investors, our job is to find opportunities that will bring outsized returns for our LPs, right? So, but I think we may want to bucket the different opportunities into different segments. Not every climate tech companies are deep tech, frontier tech, right? Not everything is about the next, best-in-class technology in the EV space. But there are companies that are, very close to business model that we know, whether it's around green financing, whether it's about SaaS, whether it's about, e-commerce platform, but with a sustainability and climate lens. And for those, actually, the way to evaluate them is very simple. What's your business, what's your market size? What's your business model? What's your go-to-market strategy? There are absolutely opportunity for companies like this to be profitable because you're simply applying the existing technology and business model with a climate lens. Now, when you think about deep tech companies, obviously, then there's a lot of capital involved upfront to get to commercialization. Then it's about whether you can get to the POC, whether you can de-risk the technology. So I think we shouldn't be, taken aback because of the word climate, right? I think we can just apply the same principle as we would for other sectors to look at this sector. And then we will, there will be actually a lot more similarities than we thought there may be.
So I used to work in traditional private equity. I started 30 years ago. And before I joined Circulate Capital, I thought, I'm not sure whether you can make money, And after almost a year, I can tell you there is profitability. And there are a lot of mature companies out there. And there are a lot of opportunities to help younger innovation companies to then work with the mature companies and also, the big corporates that are investors in our fund to either transition or to amplify the technologies that they have. So there is money to be made. I mean, I'm just pleasantly surprised, and it's just such a pleasure, to be able to invest and get a financial returns. But on top of that, you make a big impact on the environment, on society in general, and you create a lot of jobs for the vulnerable.
So one of the other hats that I wear is as chairman of a circular packaging company for the wine and spirits industry. Every year, there are 70 billion single-use glass bottles that get manufactured, 70 billion, just for the wine and spirits industry. A lot of them end up in the landfill, where it takes 10,000 years or thereabouts to degrade, or because glass is so expensive to manufacture, even if you recycle, you only save about 20–30% of the resources. So we came up with a refillable, reusable tote to replenish the vodkas that you drink. I don't feel so bad if it's after 5 o'clock, we can talk about alcohol in a nice, friendly manner. But what I'll tell you is that in the past, this is not deep tech. This is just changing the way we do supply chain with the brands, with the spirits industry. Of course, we now have, on top of the hardware, we have a layer of analytics on top of it. But by doing this, and I'm very happy to wax lyrical about it, but whoever's interested can come and talk to me after this. But at the end of it, we save about half a kilo of carbon per bottle that uses our solution. And then on top of that, we save brands. So for every bottle of spirits, only 30% of the spirit that you drink goes into the making of the spirit. 60 to 70% goes towards the shipping and handling of the glass bottle that encases the spirit. So, long story short, we have brands like companies like Pernod Ricard, Diageo, Rémy Cointreau, all these Fortune 500 companies that have committed to net zero, and we are partnering with them to deliver the solution. A small startup, which I'm very proud to say is made in Singapore, and it's precisely going by partnering companies that have made these commitments. This is a new revenue opportunity for startups that you want to invest in. Look at how they can help big companies, governments solve this net zero commitments. And it's really good business. The company is already profitable. Wavemaker was an investor. We went into 20 markets within 2 years, and it's growing very strongly, exponentially. So, as I go back to it being climate tech is good business. Look into it.
So we are mindful of time as well, and I want to also involve our audience in the question and answers that we have over here. And we have a question over here come on screen right here. Developing countries like Pakistan are bearing the brunt of global carbon emissions despite contributing less to emissions. How can startups help? And I think not just perhaps Pakistan, but even broader in general developing countries. What do you think startups can do in this entire issue?
Yeah, so climate crisis is a social inequity problem, right? We all know that. It is the main topic of negotiation in every COPs, right? And a bunch of us are going to represent Singapore in Egypt this year for COP27, and it's going to be a main topic, right? The developing countries are ganging up together and, you know, asking the more developed countries to say, hey, you cause all these things, why are we paying the price? And I think, you know, specific to that question, I think innovators and innovations and startups can be that equalizer, right? Where we're able to start to measure, provide data onto that whole carbon economy, you know, where are the data pipes for that? And maybe find different monetization models to help equalize some of these social inequities.
I think we could also look at it as a bit of opportunity for startups over here, right? If we look at our region, Southeast Asia, we are one of the regions with the most amount of biodiversity. And so, you know, the whole topic and sector on carbon offsetting and the carbon credit, actually, if you think about, you know, nature-based solution, we actually have a lot of opportunity in our part of the world. And these carbon credits have proven actually in the current voluntary market to command higher price point than other types of carbon credits, right? So this is a way to bring some of the dollars over to our part of the world, and technology can help open up the opportunity to long-tail smallholder farmers, for example, to tap into these opportunities as well.
For me, Southeast Asia, the agrarian community, agriculture is the fundamental, the largest segment, right? And there's actually a lot of smallholder farmers here. And a lot of carbon emissions come from a couple of things like a lot of people are still using diesel pumps for irrigation. Converting that simply into solar pumps already save you a lot of emissions. Wet rice cultivation, that's the second largest emitter of carbon globally in the agricultural sector. And you know what rice is to all of us. And so, being able to optimize yield and to improve the harvesting cycles make a very big difference in reducing the methane and nitrous oxide that come from this particular cultivation. So there are actually a lot of things that we can do from the convergence of technology, actually, and then startups can play a very big role.
So based on our studies, we found out that you can actually, you know, save about 30 to 70% in terms of the carbon emissions if you do recycling, and that's why we focus on that. And you can actually measure it. I mean, we have a non-profit organization that's under Circulate Capital called the Circulate Initiative. If you really want to find out like how much impact you have, and it's free, you can go to the website, it's free. You just key in the data that you want, how much recycled materials you've done for the day or done for the month, and you can get up, you can generate the carbon emissions that you have saved, the greenhouse gas emissions that you have saved. And because of that, it is science, it is proven, and the data is easily calculated. So for us, we not just invest in recycling companies, but we also have a innovation investment mandate. And these innovation companies, they come up with game-changing solutions, new bio-based or new ways of replacing the fossil-based chemicals that are used to produce, for example, your textiles and all that. So we have a company called Circ, and recently we raised about $30 million US from the Bill Gates Foundation. Basically, it takes all your garments, which is polyester and cotton combined, most difficult material to recycle, and it actually recycles it and it splits it into both cotton and polyester. So innovations plus recycling, if you combine these two together, there is a huge amount of emissions that you can actually prevent from going into the atmosphere.
We should probably tackle the issue of greenwashing as well. And we do have a question that alludes to that come on screen right here, that there are no major governance arms to audit decarbonization or carbon neutrality. And Grace, I expect you have something to say about this as well. You know, how can we solve this problem collectively as an ecosystem? And I think tied to this question, I also want to ask, before we wrap up the session, that when we talk about the startup ecosystem taking the lead, exactly who should be taking the lead as well? Are we talking about VCs, the startups themselves, ancillary service providers, financiers? Who is doing the work? Who should be doing leading the race in terms of this agenda? Yep. So, Grace, I think you start with you.
Maybe I'll take the second question. That's a more fun question. The first one is easy. There's convergence happening already, or frameworks that will basically play the role of the US gap, for example, in non-financial reporting, right? Look into GRI, look into TCFD. There's all this convergence going on. It will take some time, right? Also, every carbon measurement now is an estimation. We believe we have the most accurate methodology and model to give the most accurate one, and we ourselves are getting audited to oblige with ISO 14064, which is a GHG standard with the ISO. On the second one, I really think that VC money follows the best founders, right? Full stop. It follows talent, of course, with the investment thesis in place. So it is really the founders, the repeat founders, those that are done with fintechs, right? Should really look into how they can use their backgrounds, their unique network experiences, capital, to come and solve, build AI models for climate and carbon capture technologies for the planet. And also, so for a real data point, right, Unravel is part of the Y Combinator Winter 22 cohort, so January to March. We had 400 companies in the cohort, way too many, right? Because YC is very hard to get in, right? Like 2% acceptance rate versus Harvard, that is 4%. And it was the first time in the history of YC where we had the most climate tech companies, 25 in that cohort. Even Paul Graham has to tweet about it, So there's really a trend of founders, of technologies, of PhDs in AI that are coming into this, and then I'm sure the VC money would follow.
Anybody else?
I think ultimately it's also driven by market, right? If there's no market, then the founders may also not start companies in this direction. So I think we are really seeing a big movement. And so VCs, startups, founders, corporates are all responding to this trend.
I think regulators also have a very big role to play. In many markets which don't really, so Singapore is very regulatory compliant. And the moment the SGX and the MAS says, you've got to disclose how much you're doing, what you're doing with ESG, a lot of people follow. So I actually think it's a combination of regulators, investors backing the right founders, mainstream capital providers. So it's not just a venture capital thing, it's actually the banks providing alternate forms of capital to drive the whole industry. And then, of course, the consumers, the people who want to buy your product, the people who are going to work in the company. So I think it's really a concerted effort by everyone. We saw during COVID how a unified global response has, we can do it. We as a human race, we can do it. And how we came and developed the vaccine the fastest the world had ever seen through government involvement, corporations, investments, and consumers.
Yeah, maybe a quick one, right? Give it 2-3 years, where every potential job candidate or employee will ask you whether do you have a net zero plan? Do you have a decarbonization plan? And as employers, whether on the investor or founder side, what are we going to say, right? So that will become a criteria of the new generation of talent choosing companies to join. Same with the criteria that the banks would take for capital decisions. Consumer as well, for especially things that we consume into our bodies and touches our body, fashion, food, apparel, these kind of things are definitely a lot more sensitive for that consumer pressure. So yeah, a lot of things coming at it from many angles.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I agree with all that you've said, and from our own experience, again, the two important elements. One is we have a community of investors. They all have the shared mission to decarbonize and to create a world that is going to achieve, or hopefully we can achieve, a net zero emission by 2050. It's going to take $125 trillion. So the investment part, we hope to amplify that, and we are trying to hopefully get more participants and more collaborators with us in terms of the funding. In terms of the investments, we want to direct our investments, again, companies that address the circular economy. You need to have these two big dimensions. And the government is, of course, at the end of the day, one of the key participants as well. We need the regulators to be supportive of the agenda that is now high on the priority of investors as well as the investees that we are trying to support. So it takes the whole world. It's a huge problem. So I would think that, since everybody is still here and, hopefully you share our agenda as well, and you can, either work with us. We have several outlets. We have the nonprofit outlets, as I mentioned, the Circulate initiative, which also is involved with another setup called Second News and the incubation network. So it is a fully integrated community that we have established, from very young companies to established companies that are transitioning, and then supported by the DFIs. We have the World Bank, the Propaco, the French government, and then the EU, the European Investment Bank as well, supporting us, and the US government. And then on the corporate side, we have big brands that are really serious and they want to be a solution to a problem, of course, which has been carried forward, but we want to make sure that the buck stops here. And let's try to make this world a better one.
Thank you so much. And in case all of you were wondering what was passed to me, it says time's up. So I have to wrap this up. Ladies, thank you for your wisdom, and let's give a round of applause for our panelists over here.